You've probably been told that if you just love harder, care more, give more, and stay patient, eventually they'll come closer. But what if that's exactly why they keep pulling away? What if the more you try to hold on, the more they feel the need to escape? And here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. The moment you stop doing what feels natural and start doing what actually works, everything changes. Because there is one shift, just one, that flips the entire dynamic. And it's not chasing, it's not convincing, it's not proving your worth. It's something far more uncomfortable, but far more powerful. When you do this, something strange starts to happen. The distance you once feared becomes the very thing that makes them turn around. The silence you once avoided becomes the reason they start thinking about you. And the attention you once gave so freely becomes the very thing they begin to crave. This is not about playing games. This is about understanding psychology at a level most people never reach. Because once you understand this, you stop feeling powerless and start becoming the one they can't stop thinking about. You see, avoidant individuals don't operate the way most people expect. When things get emotionally intense, when closeness starts to feel real, something inside them activates. It's not that they don't feel, it's not that they don't care, it's that closeness to them feels like a loss of control. And the moment they feel like they're losing control, they create distance. So when you move closer, they instinctively move away. When you ask for reassurance, they feel pressure. When you try to deepen the connection, they feel trapped. And without even realizing it, you step into a cycle that keeps repeating itself. You give more, hoping it will bring them closer. They pull back, needing space to breathe. You try harder, thinking consistency will fix it. They withdraw even more, feeling overwhelmed. And suddenly, you're stuck in a loop where the more you invest, the less they show up. It feels confusing, it feels unfair, and it makes you question your own worth. But the truth is, it's not about your worth. It's about how your energy is being perceived. Because to someone who fears emotional closeness, your effort doesn't always feel like love. Sometimes it feels like pressure. And this is where most people make the mistake that pushes everything further away. They double down, they send that extra message, they explain themselves again, they try to fix what feels broken, they become more available, more understanding, more patient. They think if they just show enough love, eventually it will be returned. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you give in that state, the less value your presence seems to hold. Not because you're not valuable, but because you're always there. Always ready, always giving. And when something is always available, it stops being felt, it stops being missed, it stops being chased. So instead of creating attraction, it creates comfort. And comfort without emotional safety on their side leads to distance. You start to feel like you're doing everything right, yet getting nothing in return. And deep down, you begin to feel exhausted because loving someone shouldn't feel like you're constantly trying to earn their attention. It shouldn't feel like you're the only one holding things together. But when you're stuck in this pattern, it's hard to stop because pulling back feels like losing them. Silence feels like giving up, and doing less feels like risking everything. But here's the shift. Doing more is what's been costing you everything all along. So what is this one thing? What is the shift that changes everything? It's not about ignoring them. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about something much deeper. It's about emotional self-containment. It's about pulling your energy back and placing it where it was always meant to be, on yourself. It's about no longer making them the center of your emotional world, because the moment you stop revolving around them, something powerful happens. You become grounded. You become calm. You become someone who is no longer chasing, but simply existing in your own space. And to an avoidant, this changes everything. Because now they don't feel pressure. They don't feel watched. They don't feel like they're being pulled into something they're not ready for. Instead, they feel space. And in that space, something unfamiliar begins to grow. Curiosity. They start to notice the absence of something they once took for granted. Your attention, your consistency, your presence. And without that constant input from you, their mind begins to fill in the gaps. They begin to wonder, they begin to think, and slowly, they begin to feel. Pulling your energy back is not about punishment. It's not about trying to make them miss you through manipulation. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence. It's about no longer pouring into someone who isn't meeting you halfway. And when you do this, you create a shift that they can feel even if you never say a word, because energy is loud, presence is powerful, and absence, when it's genuine, speaks louder than anything else. You stop reacting instantly. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop trying to hold their attention, and instead you redirect that energy into your own life, your growth, your peace, your happiness. And this is where things start to turn, because now, instead of feeling like they need to escape you, they begin to feel drawn toward you. Not because you chased them, but because you stopped. Not because you demanded their attention, but because you no longer needed it. And that shift, that quiet, powerful shift, is what makes them turn around and start pursuing you in a way you've never experienced before. And then comes the silence, the part that feels the hardest. Because silence, to most people, feels like disconnection. It feels like something is ending. It feels like you're losing control of the situation. But to an avoidant, silence does something completely different. It gives them the space they need to finally process what they feel. Because here's something most people don't realize. Avoidants don't process emotions in the moment. When things are happening, when emotions are intense, when you're right there in front of them, they shut down. They detach. They focus on creating distance. But when you step back, when your energy is no longer right in front of them, their mind begins to open. That's when the thoughts come in. That's when they start replaying moments. That's when they begin to feel what they couldn't feel before. And your silence becomes the space where their emotions finally have room to exist. It's in that quiet that they start to realize what your presence meant. It's in that absence that they begin to miss you. And it's in that distance that the pursuit begins to grow. Not because you forced it, not because you asked for it, but because for the first time, they had the space to choose it. And as that silence stretches, something begins to shift inside them in a way you can't see, but you can feel. At first, it's subtle, a passing thought, a moment where your absence feels unfamiliar. Then it grows into something heavier, something harder to ignore. Because when you're no longer there, filling every gap, their mind starts doing something it didn't have to do before. It starts reaching for you. They begin to wonder what you're doing, who you're talking to, whether you're thinking about them the same way they're now thinking about you. And this is where everything flips, because before, you were the one constantly thinking, constantly checking, constantly feeling. Now that energy has shifted. Now they are the ones sitting in the quiet, feeling something they can't immediately escape. And for someone who is used to distancing themselves from emotions, this creates a kind of tension they don't know how to handle. It's not overwhelming in the way closeness feels. It's different. It's curiosity mixed with a sense of something missing. And that missing feeling begins to pull them toward you slowly, almost unconsciously. They start revisiting memories. Small moments that once felt ordinary now carry weight. Your words, your presence, your energy, all of it begins to echo in their mind. And without realizing it, they begin to emotionally move toward you, even if physically nothing has changed yet. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think attraction is built through constant presence, constant reassurance, constant effort. But what truly creates depth, what truly creates emotional impact is space. Because space forces reflection. Space forces awareness. And for someone who avoids emotional intensity, space is the only place where emotions can safely surface. When you were always there, they didn't have to feel the full weight of what you meant to them. Your presence made everything easy, predictable, controlled. But your absence, that's what disrupts their sense of control. That's what makes them feel something real. And as that feeling grows, so does their awareness of you. They begin to notice the contrast between having you and not having you. And that contrast is powerful. It's what turns something taken for granted into something deeply valued. Because humans don't fully recognize what they have until they experience what it's like without it. And in your absence, they begin to understand your presence in a way they never did before. This is where the psychology of scarcity quietly begins to take over. Not forced scarcity, not manipulation, but natural scarcity. The kind that happens when you stop overextending yourself and start valuing your own time, your own energy, your own emotional space. When you're no longer always available, your presence becomes something that has weight again, something that isn't guaranteed. And when something is no longer guaranteed, it becomes something that can be lost. And the possibility of losing you, that's what starts to create urgency inside them. Because before, there was no risk. You were always always there, always consistent, always giving. But now there's uncertainty. Now there's distance. Now there's a question in their mind they didn't have before. What if you don't come back the same way? And that question begins to pull them in, not through force, but through realization. They begin to see you differently, not as someone who is always available, but as someone who has a life, a world, a sense of self that exists beyond them. And that realization is magnetic because it shifts the dynamic from them feeling pressured to them feeling drawn. And while all of this is happening on their side, something even more important is happening on yours. You begin to reconnect with yourself. You start to realize how much of your energy was being poured into someone who wasn't fully meeting you. You start to see how much you were overextending, overthinking, overgiving. And as you pull that energy back, you don't just create distance from them, you create closeness with yourself. You begin to rebuild your sense of emotional independence. You stop waiting for messages to feel okay. You stop needing their attention to feel valued. You start filling your own life with things that bring you peace, excitement, and fulfillment. And this shift is not just external, it's internal. It changes how you carry yourself, how you respond, how you exist. You become calmer, more grounded, less reactive. And this version of you, this version that is no longer chasing or seeking validation, is incredibly powerful because now when they do think about you, they're not thinking about someone who needed them. They're thinking about someone who chose them but didn't depend on them. And that distinction changes everything. This is the moment where the dynamic fully turns because now, instead of you asking for their attention, they begin to feel the need to reach for yours. It might start small, a message that feels casual, a check-in that seems almost effortless. But behind that message is something deeper, a pull they can no longer ignore. And when that happens, it's important to understand something that most people get wrong. When they come back, it doesn't mean the dynamic is fixed. It doesn't mean everything has suddenly changed. It means the shift you created has opened the door, but how you respond will determine what happens next. Because if you immediately go back to overgiving, over-explaining, over-investing, the old pattern will return just as quickly. The key is to stay in your energy, to stay grounded in the version of yourself that created this shift in the first place. You don't chase their attention anymore. You don't rush to meet them where they are. You allow them to come toward you. Step by step, you match their effort, not exceed it. And in doing so, you maintain the balance that keeps them engaged, curious, and emotionally present. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about controlling someone else's behavior. It's about mastering your own. It's about understanding that attraction is not built through force. It's built through alignment. When you align with your own value, your own peace, your own emotional independence, you naturally become someone who is felt differently, someone who is not easily taken for granted, someone who doesn't need to chase because your presence alone creates impact. And for an avoidant, that kind of energy feels safe yet intriguing. It doesn't overwhelm them. It doesn't pressure them. It invites them. It allows them to come closer without feeling like they're losing themselves. And that's why they begin to pursue, not because you convinced them, but because for the first time, being close to you doesn't feel like something they need to run from. It feels like something they can move toward at their own pace, in their own way, and that's what makes the pursuit real. And just when it feels like everything is finally shifting in your favor, this is the exact moment where most people lose everything they just built. Because when they start reaching out, when the attention comes back, when you feel that pull from them again, your instincts will try to take over. You'll feel the urge to respond faster, to give more, to secure what feels like it might finally be working. And it makes sense. After all that distance, after all that silence, getting even a small piece of their attention can feel like relief, like validation, like something is finally moving forward. But this is where the real test begins. Because if you fall back into old patterns now, if you overextend the moment they show interest, the dynamic will slowly start to collapse again, not all at once, but subtly, quietly. You'll start giving more than they are. You'll start waiting again. You'll start analyzing again. And before you know it, you're right back where you started, wondering why they pulled away again. That's why this phase requires something deeper than patience. It requires awareness, the ability to stay grounded even when things feel like they're improving, the strength to not lose yourself just because they've started to come closer. Because here's the truth that most people don't realize. When they come back, they're not suddenly a different person. Their patterns don't disappear overnight. The way they process emotions, the way they handle closeness, the way they protect themselves, all of that is still there. So when they return, it's not an invitation for you to give everything again. It's an opportunity to change how you respond. This is where you stop rewarding inconsistency, where you stop accepting breadcrumbs just because you miss them. Because if you accept the bare minimum now, you're teaching them that they don't have to do more to keep you. And that's exactly how the cycle continues. So instead, you shift, you slow down, you observe, you allow their actions to speak louder than their words. If they show effort, you meet it. If they pull back, you don't chase. You remain steady. And this steadiness, this emotional control, is what keeps the dynamic balanced. It shows them, without you ever saying it, that your presence is valuable, that your time, your energy, your attention are not things they can access without giving something real in return. And this is where boundaries begin to take shape, not through words, but through behavior. Because the strongest boundaries are not the ones you explain, they're the ones you live. You don't need to announce that you won't tolerate inconsistency, you simply stop engaging with it. You don't need to argue about effort, you simply match what is given. And over time, this creates a new pattern, one where they begin to understand on a deeper level that if they want access to you, they have to show up differently, not because you demanded it, but because your actions made it clear. And this is powerful because avoidants don't respond well to pressure or ultimatums, but they do respond to energy. They respond to shifts in behavior. They respond to the feeling that something is different. And when they feel that difference, they begin to adjust. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely, because now the dynamic isn't built on you trying to hold everything together, it's built on mutual effort or nothing at all. And this is the difference between chasing and attracting, a difference that changes everything once you truly understand it. Chasing comes from a place of fear, fear of losing them, fear of not being enough, fear of things falling apart. And when you chase, your energy reflects that fear. It feels heavy, it feels urgent, it feels like you're trying to hold on to something that's slipping away. But attraction, real attraction, comes from a place of stability, from knowing that you are enough regardless of what they do, from understanding that your value doesn't decrease just because someone else can't meet you fully. And when you operate from that place, your energy changes. It becomes calm, grounded, unshaken. You're no longer trying to pull them toward you. You're simply allowing them to come closer if they choose to. And that choice, that freedom, is what makes them feel safe enough to move toward you without resistance, because now they're not being pulled, they're being invited. And as you continue to stay in this energy, something even deeper begins to happen. You start to let go, not in a forced way, not in a way where you pretend you don't care, but in a real, quiet, internal way. You stop attaching your emotions to their actions. You stop letting their presence or absence define your mood. You stop waiting for something to happen in order to feel okay. And this is where your power fully returns to you, because now, whether they come closer or pull away, you remain the same, steady, whole, complete within yourself. And ironically, this is the point where they feel the strongest pull toward you, because there is nothing more magnetic than someone who is not trying to control the outcome, someone who is not clinging, someone who is not afraid of losing. That kind of energy is rare, and to an avoidant, it feels different. It feels safe, but also intriguing, because they're used to dynamics where they feel pressure, expectation, or emotional demand. But with you, they feel something else. Space, calm, and a quiet strength they can't quite explain, and that's what keeps drawing them back in. Because when you truly let go, you're no longer acting from a place of strategy, you're acting from a place of authenticity. You're not doing this to make them chase you. You're doing it because it's who you've become. Someone who values their own peace, someone who doesn't overextend, someone who doesn't settle for half-effort connections. And that authenticity, that realness, is what creates the strongest kind of attraction, not the kind that fades when things get comfortable, but the kind that grows over time. Because now they're not just drawn to your absence, they're drawn to who you are. And that's what makes the pursuit different this time. It's not based on temporary emotion, it's based on a shift in how they see you and how you see yourself. And once that shift happens, everything changes. And by the time you reach this point, something inside you has already changed in a way you can't undo. You're no longer the same person who once waited, overgave, and tried to hold everything together. You've stepped into a version of yourself that understands something deeper, that this was never just about making someone chase you, it was about breaking a pattern that was quietly draining you. Because when you look back, you start to see it clearly. How much of yourself you were giving just to feel a sense of closeness, how often you ignored your own needs just to keep things from falling apart, how you convinced yourself that if you just did a little more, things would finally feel secure. But now you see it differently. You see that the connection only felt unstable because you were the only one stabilizing it. And that realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you aware. Aware of your worth, aware of your patterns, aware of the fact that love should never feel like something you have to constantly earn. And as this awareness settles in, you begin to understand why this approach works so specifically on avoidance. It's not magic, it's not manipulation, it's alignment with how they are wired. Avoidants aren't drawn to pressure. They're not moved by constant emotional demands. In fact, those things push them further away. But what they are drawn to is emotional safety without expectation, space without abandonment, connection without control. And when you pull your energy back and step into your own life, you create exactly that environment. You become someone who doesn't overwhelm them, but also doesn't depend on them. Someone who is present, but not consuming. And that balance is rare, because most people either overgive or completely detach. But you found the middle. And that's what makes them feel like they can finally come closer without losing themselves in the process. At this stage, their behavior starts to shift in ways that feel almost surprising. The effort becomes more consistent. The communication feels more intentional. There's a sense of them trying, not perfectly, not all at once, but in a way that feels real. And this is the moment where many people feel tempted to relax completely, to assume that everything is now secure. But this is where your awareness continues to matter, because even though they're moving toward you, the dynamic you've created still needs to be maintained, not through effort, but through consistency in who you've become. You don't go back to overgiving just because they're showing up more. You don't lose your independence just because they're becoming more present. You continue to be the person who has a full life, a grounded energy, and a strong sense of self. And this is what keeps their pursuit alive, because they're not just responding to what you did, they're responding to who you are now. And then something unexpected happens. They begin to invest emotionally in a way they didn't before. Slowly, they start opening up, sharing more, letting you see parts of them that were once guarded. And it doesn't happen through pressure or deep conversations forced at the wrong time. It happens naturally, in moments where they feel safe enough to let their guard down. And this is where patience becomes important again, but not the kind of patience where you wait and tolerate anything. The kind where you allow things to unfold without trying to control the pace. Because for them, emotional closeness is something that develops gradually. And when they feel like they're choosing it rather than being pulled into it, it becomes something they can actually sustain. And that's the difference this time. It's not rushed, it's not forced, it's real. But even deeper than all of this is the realization that begins to settle in your heart. That this journey, this shift, this entire experience was never just about them. It was about you becoming someone who no longer loses themselves in the process of loving someone else. Someone who doesn't abandon their own needs for the sake of connection. Someone who understands that the right kind of connection doesn't require you to shrink, chase, or prove your worth. And once you truly feel that, everything changes. Because now, whether they continue to pursue you or not, you are no longer in a place of lack. You're not waiting to be chosen, you already chose yourself. And ironically, that's what creates the strongest pull of all. Because when someone sees that you are no longer trying to hold on to them, that you are completely okay within your own world, it shifts how they see you on a fundamental level. You are no longer someone they can take for granted. You are no longer someone who revolves around them. You are someone who has options, depth, and a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced. And that kind of presence it stays with them. It lingers in their mind. It makes them want to step closer, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. Because now, being with you doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like something valuable, something they don't want to lose. And this is where the pursuit becomes undeniable, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in consistent, intentional actions. They start reaching out more, showing up more, making space for you in their life. And it doesn't feel forced, it feels natural, because it's coming from a place of them wanting to be there, not feeling like they have to. And that's the difference between temporary attraction and real pursuit. One fades when the dynamic becomes comfortable, the other grows because the foundation has changed. And the foundation now is built on mutual respect, space, and emotional balance. And in the end, the truth becomes clear in a way that feels almost poetic. The moment you stopped chasing them is the moment they started chasing you. The moment you stopped trying to prove your worth is the moment they began to see it. The moment you let go of the outcome is the moment everything started to fall into place. Not because you controlled it, but because you finally aligned with something real. And that one thing you were looking for in the beginning, it was never a trick, never a tactic. It was a transformation, a shift from seeking love to embodying it within yourself. So if you're still holding on, still wondering, still questioning what to do next, remember this. The power was never in making them come back. The power was always in becoming someone who doesn't need to chase anyone to feel chosen. And when you truly step into that, you don't just change the dynamic with them, you change the dynamic with everyone who enters your life from that point forward.